Hello everyone. The new Ys game, Ys Memoire in Felghana. Well, it's of course not a new game, it's an old game remastered. So today, an unboxing and a look back at the original in Felghana, which I played quite a number of years ago now. I don't have time at the moment to play this new version. Like everybody else, my backlog is overflowing from last year, so this will have to wait till later in the year as a little treat. But since I've already played the game, basically, I feel I know it quite well, and I've checked some data about this new version, so we can talk about that a bit. So first up, of course, I'll get the cellophane off. My box arrived this morning from Amazon. Of course, I had to import the North American version to get this little box edition. It's called the Refined Edition, which naturally is not available here in New Zealand. So since I don't have actually a physical version of the original in Felghana, I thought it would be nice to have something physical for it. It's not a full-fledged limited edition, and that's why they call it a refined edition, and it contains, apart from the game of course, an acrylic diorama and keychain set, a CD soundtrack, a full postcard set, and a microfiber cloth. So all smaller items, less expensive. As you know, I've talked about this before, proper limited editions and collector's editions are getting more and more expensive and out of the reach of most people these days, let's face it. So something smaller that's still collectible is probably a good idea. Let's see whether the items stack up. So they've stuck with the original title design, as far as I can tell. That's how I remember it, but we'll have a look at that in a moment. And the box just opens up with this flap, and that's the Switch edition. The game is also available on PlayStation, both 4 and 5, and also on PC, of course. It's been available for some time there. It is, however, not on the Xbox. This is what I was waiting for. I'll explain in a moment. They call it an adventure guide. And I'm thinking it must be based on the original manual that came with certainly a physical manual that came with the PSP version. We'll have a look at that in a moment. So this is quite nice. So a map of the world and some of the places. Valestein Castle, Town of Redmond, the land of Felghana, Tigray Quarry. Oh yes, if you've played the game, the old version, you will recognise those names. And on the reverse side we've got the main characters. Adol and Dogi, of course, Elena Stoddard and Chester Stoddard. And a few little highlights of the small quality of life features they've introduced in this edition, like a no fall mode, and a few tips about how to adjust the controls to your liking, etc. They have reprinted here the brief introduction from the prologue, which is also in the original manual. It gives you a bit of a background to the story and the events and prepare you for what's to come. 2 years have passed since the events in the land of Ys. The young red-haired swordsman Adol Christin has been setting his sights on new adventures in new frontiers, as he always does, wandering aimlessly from land to land alongside his eternal blue-haired companion and confidant Dogi. During their wanderings, the two of them catch wind of bad tidings in Felghana, the land of Dogi's birth. An ancient volcano has become active anew, monsters have begun appearing across the countryside, and the lord of the land has been oppressing his people without mercy. Something ominous is happening in Felghana. Stalwart and determined, the ever-benevolent heroes of Red and Blue set sail for Felghana, intent on personally confirming the validity of these rumours. Adol, however, has a sinking feeling about this particular trip. He perceives an evil awaiting him in this new land, and somehow knows that this adventure will be a most harrowing one. Almost there. You ready for this, Adol? Dogi begins to row harder as he speaks. The words shake Adol out of his trance as he grips the sail and braces himself for the trials to come. And thus a new adventure begins. So that's a nice little guide to have. It does not, however, rival the original manual that came with the version that came out in the West in 2010 for the PlayStation Portable, the PSP. It also came to PC 2 years later. Now, this game is, in fact, a remake of the original Ys III, Wanderers from Ys, and that was originally released in Japan on PC in 2005. So this game is basically 20 years old, so it's a bit of an anniversary edition, I suppose. So the 2010 PSP version is the one I played, but I never got a physical copy and I didn't play it on the PSP itself, but on my Vita, one of my many Vitas. So this is the first time that the game has been reissued and certainly remastered since those days. It's of course not available to purchase anymore, even if you have a Vita, but I was able to re-download it, of course, from my original purchase, from my download list. So loading up my clear file, I can see, it's lovely, they have all the data there. Modern games often don't do that anymore, and I find that really annoying because it's just so interesting to look back and see when did I finish a game, what level was I at, all the stuff, you know. So I don't know whether you can see the screen, probably not because of the light and everything. So I'll just read it out to you. The date is the 30th of August 2017, so we're sort of like 7.5 years ago. I was level 51, playtime 31 hours. And I finished it on easy because obviously it was getting rather difficult. And my fingers back then were already rather compromised. But of course now it's got even worse in the intervening 7.5 years. So it'll be interesting to see how I'll be able to cope with that nowadays. Yeah, not very good, is it? So here is the original manual, and it runs to 66 pages. It is incredibly detailed, as they used to be back in those days. All the different controls for the actions are all documented. So if you put down the game and then maybe return after a week or two and think, as I often do, what were all the different controls, the buttons, what does what, it's so easy to just quickly remind yourself. So I hope they have a help file integrated into the new remastered version. Anyway, that was a look back at Ys, Oath and Felghana, playing it on the Vita, which was a fantastic experience because, as I've said so many times before, the Vita is an incredibly ergonomic handheld device, especially I would say for smaller to medium-sized hands. Larger hands might not find it quite so good. I don't find the Switch as good in that regard, not as ergonomic. I had a slightly unusual playing experience with Oath and Felghana because, as many of you will know, especially if you follow me on Twitter, etc., I tend to play several games within a time period. I'm the same with books and TV series, etc. I always like having lots of stuff on the go. It is rare for me to get stuck into one game and play that game exclusively from start to finish without, trotting off to any of the other games. But that's exactly what I did with Oath and Felghana. Once I had started, I just had to go all the way through. I wouldn't say it was actually the story, because I do love a good narrative, as you know. It wasn't really primarily the story that pulled me through. The story is fine, but it's not quite the highlight that it tends to be in newer Ys games. They have strengthened the whole story trajectory. In these older games, the focus was much more, I think, on the world and the gameplay. And that's, of course, where Ys always shines. Ever reliable. The combat is just so fluid and so wonderful. And having that experience back in 2010 or 2017 was really special. It had that addictive gameplay loop that you just thought, I just need to push on a bit more to get that other upgrade, because the cycle in the game is pretty straightforward. It's not a complicated game. Just occasionally you have to pay attention to, finding certain things, let's put it like that. But it's basically, work through a particular area or section, make sure you level up consistently, get the items you need to upgrade your equipment and whatever else you need to be able to face the next area. It's pretty traditional standard stuff, really, for a JRPG, but they just do it so well. And of course you do get attached to Adol and Dogi and, the other characters. It can be hard to define. There is just a certain je ne sais quoi about the game, about many of the Ys games, I would say. They've got that special something that just elevates them above the other crowd. This unput-downable factor. If you've started playing or discovered Ys only recently, like with one of the new games, maybe Ys X Nordics, which was, pretty successful and proven pretty popular, you might want to go back and experience an older Ys game, like Ys Origin, or now Oath in Felghana is easily available. I have no hesitation in recommending it. It's a great game. So let's have a look what else is in the box. The soundtrack. Sound Memoire 2010 to 2020. I think they've done something a bit special with the soundtrack. So we've got 14 tracks, starting with Prelude to the Adventure 2010 and going through until track 13 and 14 are from 2020. So nicely presented soundtrack with a reasonable number of tracks, I would say. So this is a little microfiber cloth, and it is actually really cute. Also quite thick, very nice material. Here are the 4 art postcards. I think it's quite nice to have a JRPG that isn't 60 to 80 hours long. Something that you can finish within a 20 to 30 hour time span in our modern lifestyle is something that I know a lot of people are looking for. So here we have the art card that would be, I think, the main profile picture for Oath in Felghana. Here's a nice one. I think that's probably Elaine. Since it's 7.5 years ago since I played the game, my memory isn't that strong anymore, but here's one of her in cat costume. And this one would be of Elena and Chester. It's not Elaine, it's Elena, I think. And the pièce de résistance, the acrylic diorama, which I shall struggle to put together with my crooked old fingers, and we'll have a look. I think this is how it's meant to be. As you probably know if you've watched some other unboxings of mine, I'm not the biggest fan of acrylic standees or dioramas or whatever. I prefer the more traditional figurine sets, or sometimes some publishers do a sort of cardboard type pop-up books. They can also be very nice. The figures on this set are what I would call semi-chibified, but the artwork certainly looks authentic, like it is taken straight from the original artwork. This is the original character artwork for Elena, and this is the modernized version. They call it refined. Personally, I like to stick with the original. I think it just suits the overall design. So that's the complete set in the box. I'm sure many of you, especially in North America, will have opted to get the refined edition. So let me know whether you are pleased with it. So all that remains is to talk a bit more about the game, the new remastered version. As I mentioned earlier, I haven't played it yet. I don't have time at the moment. But I have checked some information about it, and in particular there is one very thorough and balanced review, which I would recommend if you want to check out, is the game for me, especially for those of you who have played the original and are wondering whether it's worth getting the remaster. I think this is a review that will probably answer all or most of your questions, and as usual I'll put the link in the video description below. Just a few notes from the review in RPGSite. It does mention that the soundtrack is fantastic. If you've played the original game, you know that. Turbo mode, something a lot of people probably have been looking forward to. There are some mixed comments about that. Probably not expected to be perfect. The performance, especially on the Switch, is not quite what it probably should be. So if that's important to you, then I would say definitely check the review or any other reviews. So basically the most important feature of the remaster is the higher resolution visuals and the target frame rate of 60 per second. There also is an option to skip cutscenes, which will be welcome, especially if you need to replay something like, the boss fights are not always easy, and you don't have to go through the whole palaver again. I mean, that's really welcome. I remember that was a criticism at the time, that it got a bit tedious having to replay the scenes. That's it. An old game with a new and fresher coat of paint. Still worth playing? Absolutely, yes. Especially if you love JRPG and the more classic, more old school style. The Ys games always combine the typical JRPG elements with a bit of platforming and puzzle solving as well. Not too much. I don't like too much of that in my RPGs, but, just a well-judged amount really livens up the whole thing. Ys, Oath and Felghana, the Memoire edition. You will let me know, no doubt, if you've already got it or if you intend to play it, what your experience with it was. I just love Ys games, as you know. That's it from me today. As always, thank you very much for your time. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.